Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Listen, I'm really excited about tonight. I'm really happy to be talking about three of my favorite things: comic books, sports, and Chicago. And joining us right now, it's Kyle Higgins. Kyle, I understand Lance was having trouble signing on. Are you able to forward? Does he have the link? I mean,
He has a link. He just said, I can't get logged on. Am I supposed to be logged on somehow? And I said,
well, he's just supposed to click on that link. So I don't know if you want to, I was going to play.
Back to him.
Okay, and then, and truly, you can call him while we're talking as well, because what I was going to do is to introduce your new book, The Trap, was play your Kickstarter video as well. So if you want, while we're playing that video in a second, you can call Lance and walk him through if he needs to, any help. But yeah,
let me. Here, I'm gonna call him. I'm gonna call him right now.
Okay, all good, man. Well, I'll tell you what. The Trap, folks, is a brand new book that Kyle and Lance Briggs, former Chicago Bear, are doing, and I am going to show you the video for their Kickstarter campaign right now. Here it is.
My name is Lance Briggs. Many of you might know me from the days that I played professionally for the Chicago Bears. But what you may not know is that I've been a fan of comics all my life. I've known Kyle for a number of years now. Obviously, I'm a fan of his work.
I've been a diehard Chicago Bears fan my entire life. In a lot of ways, I actually attribute my early love of storytelling and drama to noon kickoffs and fourth quarter comebacks. So the opportunity to come in and build out a new world with one of my all-time favorite Bears in Lance has been incredibly exciting. The best science fiction is allegory. And so while there are a lot of extraordinary aspects to the world of The Trap, at its core, this is a story about very relatable people in an environment that is not all that dissimilar from our own. It's taking issues of the day and recontextualizing them through a science fiction lens.
Jalen is a special character. He wants to be great. He knows that there's greatness in him, but he also knows when the race is over, he has to go back to the perils and dangers of everyday life.
Lance and I have been working on this story for about 1.5 years now, bringing all the different aspects of our own unique lives together to build something that is both a product of the two of us as well as a way to talk about issues that are close to both of our hearts. Joining us are two artists who I absolutely love and have been wanting to work with for a very long time, Danilo Beyruth and Tamara Bonvillain. As you can see from these early pages here, Sci-fi has never looked this good.
Now you know a little bit about what we're doing. Now we really hope you'll join us in bringing the trap to life.
So there you go. Kyle is talking to Lance right now, and I think we're going to have him on momentarily. But that's a good look at the trap. Great video, Kyle. Well done. Nice going.
Thank you. It's almost like my my years of film and video editing somehow paid off for once.
Is this your first Kickstarter?
It is. I've never done a Kickstarter before. I've backed a few of them, but I've also, I followed them over the years. A number of friends have done Kickstarters, and unfortunately, I guess I would say I don't have enough Kickstarter volume editions of books as I should. But I've gone, I've in the past tended to miss a campaign, and then I go to eBay and buy the hardcover or buy the or the whatever version. But so this is the first time I've been a part of one and built it out from the ground floor with Lance and David Hyde and Danilo Beyruth, Tamara Bonvillain, Sasha Head, Hassan, whose last name I cannot pronounce, but I'm going to learn it tomorrow because Hassan and I are doing a video interview. And it's been a bit of a roller coaster. Like, I wasn't sure what to expect. But to do an OGN, especially right now, is a bit of a challenge in this market. But also, even outside of this market, just doing an OGN in general, it's such a really cool, exciting format. But there's a reason they don't happen all that often in the creator-owned space, the truly creator-owned space. They're very hard to subsidize and to pay for. And so we decided with what this book is, and Lance and I have been working on it behind the scenes for about a year and a half, as you could see in that video, that it was like, well, why don't we try this? And for those who don't know, it's so cool to do this with you right now, John, because I was about to say, like, well, I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but this is literally the podcast to get in the weeds.
Please. We live in the weeds. We live in the weeds. Yeah. We're living in the weeds. That's how much we're in the weeds. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, I did a breakdown for somebody recently where I was explaining to them the difference. Oh, it was Lawrence Holmes. Lawrence had me on his House of L podcast.
On the score. Fantastic. Or on his
love
podcast.
Lawrence. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So he had Lance on the score, and then he had me on the podcast. And on the podcast, I was going through the difference between a collected edition, a trade paperback, and a graphic novel. And those are terms that tend to be kind of thrown around synonymously, but they are quite a bit different. And the biggest distinction between them is that a comic book / collected edition is something that is collecting a prior publication. So a monthly comic book series, whether it's a mini or an ongoing, comes out in the direct market once a month, usually, or if you're Watchmen, once whenever. Which I want to circle back on that because I can't. I mean, I wasn't. It was before my time, but like, that book was super late, right? Like, no one ever talks about that. Yeah.
That and even the Dark Knight Returns original miniseries. Yeah, I mean, literally, like, I'm sure it was at least a year between issues 3 and 4 of Dark Knight, and yeah, Watchmen.
Wow.
Yes, late. It's so funny. I'm talking to Dave Gibbons next week because we're doing Baltimore Comic-Con.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that, man, and I got to tell you, if I may for a second regarding Watchmen, then we'll get back to your OG and then what you're talking about. Honestly, met Dave in 2009, could not have been more gracious. Did a couple podcasts with him, and he is consistently, every time I would see him when we had conventions, John, I've been listening to the last few episodes, and truly, as always, exceptional work. And it's like, Dave Gibbons. I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. And all my college friends when Watchmen was coming out.
John, you are a legend. You know that, right?
Stop it.
No. You are in this field, in comics, as well as interviewers go. specifically with comics, even more so, like you are very, very, very well regarded. A friend of mine is a writer, and I believe you had him on recently. I was actually just thinking about him earlier today, that I should drop him an email. John Callan, who's an animation writer predominantly, but a huge comic book nerd. Yeah,
great guy.
And yes, I use the term nerd in a positive way. Like,
okay.
There he is.
Man.
Hold on, real quick. Let me finish the story, Lance. And I'm old and I'll forget. But John, I remember John and I talking a few years ago about Word Balloon, and he was like, "You've been on Word Balloon," and I said, "Yeah," and he goes, "Yeah, you don't understand. Like, John Suntress and Word Balloon is the top of the top for me, I've been listening to it since college, and that's where I go to hear the Bendis tapes, and that's where I go to actually hear real conversation about comic books in a critical way, as well as a nuts and bolts fashion, and so I haven't heard the episode, but I did see that he joined you for an episode or two, and I always remember that conversation. I don't know if he remembers telling me that, but I remember it. And so I don't know, Lance. I don't know if you're aware of the. Oh, he took his headphones out.
That's all right. He's got to go to the bathroom or whatever.
I was saying, he's in the fridge. I can see his reflection.
Yeah.
Wait till he comes back.
No problem. It's all good.
So Lance, I don't know if you're aware. I don't know if you're aware of the absolute legend that we are speaking with right now, Lance.
Okay, talk to me now.
No, I'll put it in perspective as soon as he's done, like shining my knob right now.
So John, you're gonna get a Venmo request after this, John. Don't worry. So Lance, John is a Chicago boy.
Yeah.
Born and bred. Well, no, that's different. Born and raised, right? Born and bred is kind of the same thing. It's amazing anyone pays me to put words together. Yeah. So John is a born and raised Chicago native. He has had a long career in Chicago radio, with both 670 The Score as well as WBBM. Okay. I don't know, John, are you somewhere right now? I'm actually not sure.
No, sadly, I'm one of the casualties, downsized because of COVID and the lack of, advertising revenue. But I'm doing okay, and thankfully, the podcast is well subsidized by my listeners via Patreon and sponsors, so I'm doing okay. Lance, I missed you by like 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Because I was at the Score for 9 years, and I left in 2001. But I worked with Mike North and Terry Boers and Dan McNeil and Bernstein, Lawrence, all those guys. Oh yeah, no, they're longtime friends, man.
Mike North tricked me into guaranteeing a win against Peyton Manning and the Colts in 2004. And we went on to get beat by like 30 points.
I understand. Now I was just I sidekicked for North for a few years. I was McNeil and Boers producer. Mike Greenberg was on the station. I mean, I go back to when the station first started.
Okay.
And
that's awesome.
So I missed you by a couple years. I was at Sporting News Radio when you broke in the league and stuff, and so I was with them for about 5 years. So yeah.
But in addition, and John can sit here and talk. He can talk history of heavyweight boxing. He can talk Chicago sports. He can also talk comics like none other. So
well-rounded.
Very. And this podcast in particular, Word Balloon, I was just telling John just before you jumped on that this is, as far as comics go, like this is the cream of the crop. Like this is.
That's very kind.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, for starters, journalism in comics is. It's challenging. Yeah, it's challenging because there's not a ton of money. There's not a ton of money to make comics in the first place.
Right.
But then to cover comics is even more challenging, especially in the last 10 years. But John has been running Word Balloon for 15, 20? How long have you been doing
15 years, 2005.
So Word Balloon is Word Balloon is like the Charlie Rose of comics. Like it's where creators go to talk about in depth, or like inside the actor's studio, like in depth, the process and what went into this. Like John had this series for a long time. I don't know if you're still doing it, but the Bendis tapes, where Brian Michael Bendis would just get on a call with John for like sometimes 4 hours at a time and talk about whatever you want to talk about with regards to comics, and then they would put it out as a series of podcasts. So like I said, we're in the presence of
greatness.
Comics royalty here, yes.
Okay.
Well, we're also in the presence of a great football player as well, and especially a great bear. So it's fantastic. And Lance, I remember back in like 2006 or 7, you've made comics in the past as well, correct?
Yeah. I helped create the comic book Seraph with Top Cow, and that was my first. That was my first real experience writing a comic or having some experience, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and it was awesome when when you get to see the release date, and everyone's really excited, and you have the comic in your hand, and it's like holding it's kind of like holding your own baby.
I hear you, man. No, I mean the three of us can relate to that. I used to write for Boxing Illustrated, Bert Sugar's old magazine. And exactly, when I knew I had a column in the magazine, there was nothing like seeing the magazine on the newsstand, picking it up, seeing your name inside, and it's a great feeling. So no, I can definitely relate. Absolutely, man. So we ran the video for The Trap, which is kind of a futuristic look at sports and life lessons and stuff. What inspired this story?
Well, the inspiration, it really kind of came from my childhood. Kind of the trials and tribulations of a kid, from a less than ideal community, and really what it takes in order for that kid to make it out, and the whole idea that you have to make it out, I think is part of our focus. I'm more of the exception to the rule than the rest of the great athletes that I played with, because I played with a bunch of guys that were as good or better than me at football, but we're never going to hear about them, because they didn't have the support system and they didn't have the mother that I had. And football was really the backbreaker for me. Football controlled everything in my life. So if I had gotten into trouble, and the threat of taking football away, I would straighten up. My grades started to dip, and they said, well, if you don't have grades, you can't play football. Well, I would bring my grades back up. So everything revolved around that. And, every kid isn't that lucky, but every kid should have the opportunity to success. I think every kid should have an opportunity to it. So that's kind of what the focus is. And that's where it was inspired from.
And Kyle, how'd you guys get together?
Well, yeah. So Lance and I have known each other for 7-8 years, something like that. And I was a big fan. I am to this day a big fan of the Chicago Bears, but particularly watching Lance play, I saw an article, and actually I think John, you and I have actually talked about this before, full disclosure, but I saw an article that the Chicago Tribune did that was a profile piece back in, I want to say 2012, somewhere around there, maybe 2011, about Lance Briggs loves comic books. And
I know that story. Go on. This is hilarious.
So I saw that, and I was in Los Angeles, and I had just started writing for Marvel, I think. Maybe I'd been at DC. I can't quite remember. But I was like, holy cow, like one of my favorite Bears also loves the thing that I'm doing for a living. Like, that's pretty neat. I wonder if that'll come back to, haunt me one day or connect us in some way, shape, or form. And so I think we met then. Well, I think we started talking over Twitter actually, and then met in person at a signing Lance was doing in Chicago. I happened to be in town, and then we stayed in touch. And then we grabbed lunch in LA when he was out here. And during that first trip, we also did. I hooked him up with a tour of the DC offices.
Good time.
I'm still waiting for that Hallis Hall tour. I'm still waiting.
I don't quite have the same connections now that I used to,
Right.
I don't have
missed
clearance.
out, man. I was waiting for the refurbished version of Hallis, so I guess
I just missed that too. I just missed it too.
Right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so we did a DC Comics tour and then stayed in touch. And I think we actually met up. There was another time we met up talking about possible Serif sequels with another friend of yours, I remember. And then, life happens, and sure. I did Rangers for a bunch of years, and Lance went on to keep playing football and then stopped playing football. And we got back in touch and started talking about comics again. And the really cool thing about Lance is, like, first and foremost, like, Lance is a legit comics guy, a legit comics fan. Like, I think a lot of our conversations have centered on 90s Image. And, I mean, we literally did like a 3 or 4 hour Zoom call the other night for press, just me and him. And as we were talking, it was Lance basically flipping through old, like, Fleer trading cards that his mom kept. And I was like, oh, yeah, my friend Ryan Parrott, who, John, you should have on sometime. Ryan was just telling me today about one of his favorite characters, Darkhawk. And Lance was like, what's the name? Darkhawk? Darkhawk. Yeah, I've got his card. And about 5 minutes later, there's a Darkhawk card. Is it this guy, right? I was like, that's the guy.
Oh, yeah.
So about a year and a half ago, actually, Lawrence kind of reconnected us as well. Not that we were out of touch, but like from the standpoint of, like, Lawrence texted me one day and he goes, "Hey, your ears are probably burning. Lance and I were talking about you on the Score last night about Power Rangers." And so we started talking about, like, is there a possibility of doing something eventually together? And we started meeting up about a year and a half ago in LA whenever Lance would come out. And the first time we sat down, I mean, Lance had notebooks of characters and ideas. And as we talked over them,
he didn't like them.
Really cool. What's that?
He didn't like them. He didn't like any of my characters in my notebooks.
I didn't dislike them. I didn't know how.
You need a critical ear. That's good. You need critical eyes. Absolutely, man.
All right.
That's it.
My point was, a character is only as good as the story you have for them.
Sure.
Right.
And I didn't know what the story was initially. Right. And so as we started talking about different things that influenced us and just life shit, like, as we got into, like, what Sacramento was like and what pre-NFL days were like, I mean, it absolutely resonated for me. And so I think in that first time we were sitting there talking, it was like this light bulb moment where we went, like, well, why don't we just do that? Like, let's build that world as a science fiction landscape, and then we can use it as a vehicle for some of these characters to, to explore, but also we can create new characters that are different points of view that represent different facets of this world that we also, really want to explore, that to make it kind of like, to bring it to its kind of fullest thematic potential. And so that just became the beginnings of the Trap. And like I said, it's been a year and a half, and we've done a ton of writing and built out this really cool narrative.
Gone back and forth. And
we had especially during quarantine, we had a standing Sunday Zoom call that we would do for like 2 or 3 hours just to go over everything and Google Docs. So we were both able to update things and got it to a point where we felt like, okay, like this is
we have something, right?
We have something, and we had a great art, lined up a great art team, and it became, let's pull the trigger here. Like, let's actually, let's see if we can get this, we can bring this to life. And that's where the Kickstarter comes in. And right before you jumped on, Lance, I was talking about, like, taking a graphic novel to Kickstarter. And I was walking through kind of the differences between doing a collected edition versus a graphic novel. And the graphic novel is such an exciting format, but it's so hard to actually subsidize and make, because in the trade paperback edition, there are two bites at the apple. There's the direct market, because the book is coming out in monthly installments, and then it's also collected. Whereas in the graphic novel, it's never coming out in monthly installments. It's coming out only as the collection.
Right.
And from a storytelling standpoint, that's a format that was really exciting to us, but it also makes making the book a bit more challenging because it's, you're talking 8 to 10 months on art alone to build out a 100 to 120 page story. And so that's where the campaign comes from. And we need help,
And John, I'm the guy that will go to Kyle and say, well, I like going to the comic book store and picking up my comics, and Kyle will then give me, the breakdown of why, if we go this route, this is what will happen. If we go this route, this is what will happen. And so by the end of the conversation, I'm like, all right, let's go graphic novel.
I understand.
And John, how many creators have you had on over the years that talk about ownership?
Yes, absolutely. No, it started with the Image guys back in the 90s, but I really do feel like in the 2000s it went up a notch, and especially Robert Kirkman, Walking Dead. I mean, he is the kind of golden example. And God, it was about 11 years ago when he released what we all called the Kirkman Manifesto, which was stop saving your best ideas for DC and Marvel, make your own comics.
I forgot about that. Wow.
And it was a real game changer, Lance. Honestly, I mean, really, I think a lot of people, the ambition always was, as Kyle I'm sure understands, God, someday it would be great to work for DC or Marvel, writing or drawing.
Right.
Well, now the big two almost are like college. And again, I'll even put it in sports metaphors where it's you become a star, but then you got to, really creator-owned is really the big leagues where you really get more control over your career.
Right.
And it's terrific. It really is. And now in the environment of COVID, I think, and also that scare we all had. I mean, obviously, Lance, you probably even know just as a customer, we couldn't go to stores for a couple months because of COVID.
Right. Yeah.
Diamond shut down. And the direct market, and it really was this domino effect of Diamond can't get the books to the stores have to close, Diamond has to close because of COVID, publishers don't have a way to sell their books, so we had, I'm sure you might have seen the hashtag pencils down, that affected a lot of the creators and stuff, and they weren't getting work, and a lot of creators really had to take a step back and say, what can we do with our talents without having to go to a publisher? Can we make our own books? And not only doing Kickstarter, but I was talking to Ed Brubaker, and Marcos Martin. We're exploring Marcos's online comic panel syndicate company. They put a book out that way. Brubaker in December is going to do his straight graphic novel, not like Criminal or Velvet or some of his other creator-owned stuff with Sean Phillips, where they would release magazines, as Kyle explained. No, they're going straight to graphic novel. This is a real decision time. And I also think it's a real endangered species time for the 20 or 22 page monthly comic magazine. I don't know if DC or Marvel in 2021 will continue making physical paper comics, monthly comics. I think they'll go digital first, and then the stores will get collected trades.
Well, we were talking. I mean, I remember Lance. We talked a little bit about that side of things, the DC side in particular, when it was happening, with regards to day and date digital and distributors, because DC changed distributors a couple months ago. And that, look, that's what's so great about being able to jump on this podcast. Like, we can really get into the weeds on this. Like, I just want to say first and foremost, like from the get-go, like I am, like when I said like ownership is the most important thing, or I was alluding to the fact that it's the most important thing. I stand by that, and it is a very important aspect of creating a book as far as I'm concerned. Image is my home. Like, I love Image to death. Like, it's the best deal in not only comics but entertainment by far. Doing an OGN, this is an outlier project, for us. But also, again, like the realities of building out an OGN in great times are challenging, just from a format standpoint, if you're looking to maintain ownership. And if you're looking to, to go do the book as a, it's classified as creator owned at other publishers. It's not. It's like co-creator. It's not even co-creator. It's like co-owned, sort of creator-driven book, because you're co-owning it with the publisher. But that's kind of the only financial way that doing an OGN really makes sense, because it's so much from an upfront cost standpoint without the direct market as a possibility to recoup any sort of advance, because it's not going to come out in monthly books, right? So that was something that, like, when we decided we really wanted to do this as an OGN, and with the current state, with the pandemic, etc., going to Kickstarter felt like, through all of our talks, it felt like the best route to take here. And the book and the subject matter, we think is very timely, and it's something that's close to certainly Lance's heart. It's close to my heart as well. And
it makes sense.
Yeah, that's how we are where we are right now.
Makes a lot of sense.
No, and it's great, guys, because the stores are really the customers when it's the direct market. And no disrespect to the stores, because Lance, we're all, the three of us, and people watching and listening. The community feeling you get by going to your shop, and talking to the guy who sells you your comics, the other guys who have pull lists, or they're there every Wednesday. It's a wonderful feeling. It's a really great feeling, and nobody wants that to go away. But Dave Hyde. We'll get to sports, Dave, I promise. But Dave wants to know the business. Oh, no, I'm going to be asking you that question as well later, Lance. So it's good that Dave's checking in.
That's good. I'm on top of it.
I also good, because absolutely, man. No, I got to scratch my my sports itch with you and ask you those questions as well. But I want to tell you, we played the video, and Richard Logan said great things about it, and Charlie Samaritan also said great things about it. So people are excited for the book, which is great to see.
That's cool.
But yeah, the great thing about Kickstarter is it's become its own virtual community. And it's really interesting that alongside the direct market, comics have really made a big impact in Kickstarter. I'm sure David has told you that. I'm sure Kyle has told you that.
Yeah.
And it's really great that there is this virtual community that is alongside the direct market and can operate while things are tough, for the shop owners and stuff. And again, we all want this to come back. We want this. We want shops to come back. We want conventions to come back. We love this stuff. And in the meantime, thank God we've got video, so we can do virtual con panels, kind of like what we're doing right now. And the same thing with Kickstarter. No, so beyond David, because I'm sure David guided you guys as well with Kickstarter, were there other creators that you guys talked to in terms of get advice?
Well, I mean, I didn't talk to him about this campaign specifically, but I've had conversations with Jimmy Palmiotti in the past about Kickstarter. Scott Snyder and I are still good friends, so
great.
We the only thing that made that better, Lance, was that you muted yourself for it. That was incredible.
I know. Sound bites, man. I was in production all morning, and the sounds would go up and down if we're both talking at the same time and it went loud.
Yeah.
So I'm on top of it.
Oh man, he's a pro's pro.
That's good, man. That's excellent. See, you're getting ready for your broadcast career, Lance. That's good, man. Are you doing, Lance? Honestly, as because when did you stop playing?
I stopped playing. I retired in 2015. So 2014 was my last year, and I went right into broadcasting after that.
That's awesome.
With NBC Universal, yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's great, man. So are you still doing local broadcasting? Where you?
Yeah, I'm doing local, regional, covering the Bears, pre and post game with Olin Kreutz and Alex Brown. And
that's great.
Yeah, it's a good time.
That's excellent, man. My God.
It's like we're back in the
Here's another fantastic writer, the great Bo Smith. The graphic novel is the path to the way that comic book readers, traditional and non-traditional, consume their comic book stories now and in the future. Longer shelf life, it stays longer in print. Kickstarter comics can also go to the direct to the consumers even in the pandemic, all without losing community that we enjoy in the comic book shops. Oh, and he's a Chicago Bear fan since '63.
Even better.
The one thing I do want to accent or highlight there is, and I totally agree with you, Bo. The one thing though that I've had to get my head around a bit, it is a different reading experience. Like,
sure it is.
And it's not only and I don't even mean from like the monthly, like, you know, you have to wait a month to read each chapter for if it were coming out as monthly floppies. But I even mean just from the, like, as a writer, how you sit down and structure it. Like, a trade paperback is going to have these chapter breaks, and you structure for the 20-page chunks that are going to be the monthly floppies. If you're structuring your monthly series for collected editions in mind, which that's a whole other conversation that, like, I've kind of like gone a little bit the other way, where I'm going like, why aren't we doing more done-in-ones for monthly series? But that's because we're incentivizing people to wait for trade. But that's a other conversation. But with a graphic novel, in a lot of ways, you're almost writing it truly like a for lack of a better comp, a movie, where it's designed to be. Well, it's not only it's that, but it's more about, like, it's designed to be consumed in one sitting. Like, it's designed for a singular reading experience. There are no chapter breaks. It's purely a story that is uninterrupted.
It's a lot easier.
And that is a different way to structure.
Yeah. When I fly, and I grab off the shelf, you know, I'm always shuffling when I fly and sometimes I don't have all the issues in sequence, you know. So you know, flying with the paperback, it's like I have everything in sequence. I'm not going to miss anything, and I have to shuffle less books, you know. So it just makes more sense.
But I've only written one other graphic novel, which was when I was doing Power Rangers. The last project I did there before I was this book called Soul of the Dragon, and it was a 90-page original graphic novel. And it was a little bit of a head trip to figure out, like, okay, this isn't coming out as 20. I know how to structure for 20 pages really well.
Yep.
With each section of 20 pages building narratively to, you know, the equivalent of a 100-page climax, right?
Totally.
I don't know how to necessarily do. It's almost like writing a screenplay. Like, you're writing it. You don't have cliffhangers. You're just writing it to be all done in one. And so it is, like I said, like, it's a different format and a different structure, and it has its pros for sure. Totally. The printed form of binge watching. Yeah. It has its pros for sure, but it does have some limitations to it as well from a monthly release standpoint. So, but for this, when we settled on the format of what is the most exciting for this first story, because we fully intend to tell, knock on wood, other stories in this world, this very large universe that Lance and I have been building out.
Yeah.
But structuring it as original graphic novels made our choices pretty easy as far as, like, okay, how do we realize this? Where can we go? Like, who can even kind of do this right now? Like, people are doing Kickstarter. I'm hearing good things. David talked to me about it. Palmiotti I've talked to in the past. But also, I've talked to Dan Panosian about it. Snyder just did a really successful one with Tony Daniel. Yes. And so all of that was kind of swirling as a, like, okay, in this kind of new, slightly scary, nebulous time that we're entering. And I'm not even talking about the state of the world. I'm just talking about the state of comics within the state of the world. It's like, okay, maybe this is the approach to try with this one. So,
no, and again, this is what I've been talking about with all the writers that you just mentioned, Snyder, and like I said, Brubaker, and Bo understands this as well, who's joining us online. Like you said, you don't have to write cliffhangers. Ed was saying that, again, you know, even with Panel Syndicate and what he's doing with Fridays, that I don't have to stop at 22 pages. If I want 32 pages or whatever, that's fine. And then true with the graphic novel, like you said, no, you don't need those cliffhanger breaks necessarily. So, and yeah, I'm just like you, Lance. When I hit the airport, I immediately go to the bookstore and buy a few things for the hotel, and then for the flight and for the hotel. So yeah, so you know, in fact, that's what brought me back to. I was going to say that's what brought me back to comics. Greg Rucka had written the novelization of the No Man's Land story of Batman.
I've read it.
I hadn't read a comic book in maybe 4 or 5 years, and I'm like, oh, this sounds like an interesting story. Let me read this. And thank God, Greg not only wrote the novelization, but he also was one of the writers on the actual comic book event. So that really kind of sucked me back in. I'm like, this is a great story. Jesus, who knew? And then all of a sudden, I discovered Bendis writing Powers and Ultimate Spider-Man, and Brubaker writing his stuff, and all of a sudden, I was sucked back into comics. You know, so we just like Michael Corleone. They sucked me back in.
We just did these interviews the other day, and I don't remember which outlet this was. I think it might have been Geek Vibes or Geeks Vibes or something like that.
Okay.
And they asked about I don't even remember what the question was, but I answered it about being in 5th grade, and I didn't. Oh, that's what it was. Which artists and writers I followed. Both of us followed. And I was going to ask you that too, Lance. Go ahead, but go on, Kyle, because I want to know your answer to this as well. So I didn't follow. When I was in 5th grade, I was buying comic books at the grocery store.
Sure.
And so like I would miss issues, and it was a very complicated era of Marvel where like it was the Clone Saga for Spider-Man, it was the height of the X-Men boom and everything, post the guys. So it was like you would miss chapters because in a crossover would happen, or part 1 of a story would be in this book, part 2 would be in this other book, part 3 would be in this other book, and you're just like
it's too hard to keep up.
So I followed characters and not creators. But in 5th grade, I was at the grocery store late at night with my mom and my sister, and I look up in the aisle, and there is this paperback novel by Diane Duane called Spider-Man: The Venom Factor. And I bought that, and that book was, because it wasn't a comic, it was a novel.
Right.
I was allowed to read that at school. And then I followed her. She did a few more Spider-Man novels. And then Christopher Golden did Daredevil, Predator, Smile, and some X-Men, I think it was Mutant Genesis, or Mutant something. Anyway, so he did a series of novels there. So I was following. So that was like a precursor to me following comics creators, as I was following these novelists doing interpretations of like these superheroes that I loved. And so the No Man's Land one was at the tail end of that.
Oh.
And I read it after I read the comics, which is the first time that worked out that way for me. But before that one was the one I still have sitting on my shelf over here. Denny O'Neil did a Nightfall novelization, which is much better than the comics.
Yes. I understand. I actually had the opportunity to talk to Denny about writing that novelization of their stuff. Yes, go on.
Is that on the podcast? Can I find that episode?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
You know, I really lucked out. Denny, sadly after his wife passed away, and Denny had a really bad car accident. I had interviewed Denny back in 2006, and his son Larry reached out to me and said, you know, you did a great talk with my dad years ago. He's stuck at home and kind of bummed. He goes, he could really use somebody to talk to. He goes, would you mind having him back on your show? And I'm like, I've been wanting to have him on my show for the last 11 or 12 years. Every time I wanted to, he had another bad health bout or, you know, some rough patch. And I would hear this from people that knew him well. So I'm like, all right, I don't want to bother him. And we ended up doing 3 interviews from 2018 to 2019. And they were great, intense conversations. And he couldn't have been nicer. And I mean, he's a genius. And Lance, I don't know how much of his stuff you read, but if you were reading Batman in the 90s, he edited everything. And he also wrote a lot of 90s comics, too.
Yes.
So, he was a genius. Genius Batman.
He's kind of the last of the generation. Although, I would argue maybe Pete Tomasi is the last of the generation where they were editors who could also write. And
that's true.
And were encouraged and allowed to.
Wade hasn't edited in a long time, but Wade is one of those guys, too. And by the way, just as you were describing those novels based on superheroes, they also had a bunch of great short stories. And I always tell Mark Wade, he wrote one of the best Superman short stories in one of those Further Adventures of Superman anthologies that collected a bunch of just straight print, no art, just regular books. And yeah, I mean, no, that stuff is incredible, and really like great writers. And also at San Diego, they have a special panel for those authors that write novels based on IP, intellectual properties, whether it's TV or movies or whatever, and they're great, man. And like Marv Wolfman writes a ton of them.
Yep.
Peter David writes a ton of them,
Yep.
and and now I'm blanking. Dick Tracy, Max Allan Collins, another great writer of these things. So yeah. No, I love all that stuff. I don't know, Lance, you ever read those? You ever read any like novels based with superheroes in them?
I know I've read Nightfall. No, Nightfall.
Yeah.
I know I've read. But graphic novel for me, it's more of a recent thing. Like within the last 5 or 6 years, for me, it didn't really click until I picked up one. I forget which one. It might have been the Hulk series, because I was really into the Hulk series. That was huge for me. And
but you're talking about just to clarify, you're talking about graphic novels. You've been reading comics your whole life.
I've been reading comics my whole life.
Yeah, okay.
But
you're reading issues.
Yeah, the graphic stuff. I grabbed it, and because again I would grab 1 or 2 issues, and then I'm missing a few, and now I'm like and I saw the graphic novel. I picked it up, and I had the whole story there, and I was like from that moment I said, you know what, this is what I need to be doing. I need to grab this instead of searching.
Well, all of us older readers could totally sympathize with both of you guys, because that or they used to have the plastic bags that would have 3 comics in them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you'd look and you'd be like, okay, there's Captain America on one side, and you'd flip it over, and there's the X-Men on the other side, and then in between they'd have like Damian Hellstrom or something like that. And they were all interesting, but like you said, a lot of times it really was like a piece of a story. And you'd be like, I have no idea how this ever ended. I never got to read the finish of it. Okay, fine. But at least it was still fun, and the world they sucked you into was terrific. So no,
the last time, the second to last time I was back in Chicago was for Christmas.
Okay.
Last year, and Lance was there doing NBC Sports Chicago broadcast stuff, and so we hooked up. I think it was the day of the Chiefs game, and went out and we were working on the trap together in a restaurant bar situation in the Loop. Maybe saw some Chiefs players coming in, which was a little surprising a few hours before kickoff. But
we did.
We did.
Yeah. Wow. That's old school.
Some very good ones too.
Very good ones.
That's like Obradovich and Doug Atkins and guys like that having a few pops before a game back in the '60s. I know
you know what? If they had lost, maybe it would have been a story. But they didn't. We needed them to drink more, is what the Bears fans needed that day.
Right.
But then afterwards, we had a little bit of time before Lance had to get to the studio, and so we raced over to Challengers. Shout out to Challengers Comics.
Absolutely. Dallin Patrick, great guy.
Yep. And so we went in so that we could get Lance the first volume of Stray Bullets, the David Lapham series.
Oh, that's great.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, he's an amazing writer, man. Those are great stuff. Unbelievable stuff. Lance, was it Challengers where I remember watching you?
That was it.
With Around Comics, the Around Comics podcast.
That was it.
And that's where they wrote that Tribune article. Yep. And that guy, I don't remember his name, and I don't care what his name was, but he wrote the douchiest article, basically making fun of all of us.
Yeah,
really?
He was making fun of all. Yeah, man, he was really kind of like, I'm here at Nerd Central, and I guess Lance Briggs is one of these guys. Oh yeah. That's what I thought. That was the story I thought you were talking about, Kyle. And am I wrong, Lance? Am I mischaracterizing it?
Oh, you're right. You're right. It's
and then
is this the one I read, Lance?
It's there's a picture where I'm there's a comic book that's right here. It's kind of shadowing my face, and then it's got big headlines where you're thinking, this is it's going to be a cool write up on just the connection with comics. And he takes the I would say the sports the dumb jock approach to it.
Like here's the dumb jock talking to the nerds.
Right,
and it's just
right.
like, and it was so ridiculous. It was early enough in the era of Batman Begins and Sin City, and honestly, it was films like that made me go, maybe I'm going to start doing a podcast, because I could tell that pop culture was starting to pay attention to these great ideas, characters, and stories.
Yeah, it's huge
and
now.
Exactly, man. And seriously, I had a ton of friends like my age and guys in their 40s. They were the last generations of, you like comic books, really? And that was, like a 15-year ago you know what I mean? And it's like, all right, whatever. And again, we're all comfortable liking what we like, so it didn't offend me. Now, those same friends are like, God, you were really like at the ground floor of all that shit. And it's like, I was at the ground floor of that shit when I was 5 years old reading this stuff, man.
Listen,
you guys get it? No, we all get. I mean, that's the thing. Everybody watching, everybody listening, we all, I'm sure, have had similar stories. And now the geeks inherited the earth, to misquote the famous biblical phrase. It
was hard. That was a keeping.
How was it in sports? How was it in football when it's liking this stuff? I had this conversation, I swear, with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when he was playing for the Lakers, and he would bring his copies of Heavy Metal magazine to Lakers practice and stuff. How was it for you in the Bears?
In the NFL, it's easy. I had no problems, talking to anybody about comic books and the comic book world and the comic book movies. There's a lot of my teammates would come to me having questions. They would add, they would watch a movie, and then they would, for some reason in the locker room, I'm the guy that they wanted to tell it was a great movie. I watched Avengers 2 times, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. We'll have a conversation, and then I'll start telling them about certain characters, the history or the origin of certain characters, and then I'd lose their attention.
The CW shows, when they really started happening, and when I worked in radio, and I was working at the Drive, the hard rock station.
Yeah.
And some of the secretaries would come up and go, all right, I'm watching The Flash. Can you explain Professor Zoom to me? And I'm like, have a seat. I'd be happy to explain Professor Zoom to you. And it just cracked me up. And it was great because the owners are like, enough geek talk, can we get back to work? And it's like, hey, old man, you don't get it. I'm like, guess what? This is the next thing. This stuff is happening, and it's water cooler. It became water cooler television. Certainly The Walking Dead and all these great movies, the Marvel movies. Yeah, man. And again, it's like,
it was tough growing up. My older brother would make fun of me for watching cartoons and reading comic books all the time. It was one of those things you just had to press through. But because of my brother, I always knew I would separate the two. And I'd take my comic books, I'd slide it in my binder. I keep them in my binder. And the only way that my friends would know it is if they went through my binder and they're like, hey, you got all these comic books in here. You like comics? And then, I had to come clean. I was like, yeah, I like comics. Do you? No.
What did you read? What were you reading, Lance? I already know this answer. I already know the answer, but
early on, heavy Punisher. Punisher was one of the comics that was always on the shelf. There was it was the most available comic in all of my comic book stores. So the Punisher early on, and that's how I learned about so many other characters, because there were so many crossovers. So I learned about Blade, and Morbius and and Ghost Rider and all these characters, and you wanted to see about all these other characters, and obviously X-Men, Batman. The X-Men stories were. I'm pretty sure that there was a X-Men comic with Wolverine on the cover, and that grabbed me, and I went and I picked it up, started reading, and ever since there, I was like, whoa, I love comics. And so the X-Men early on, especially when they split the teams in the blue and gold, those were great stories, and I was always in the comic book store trying to find out where this was going to go, or these stories are going to go.
Honestly, I'd like to hear both of your opinions on this because it's kind of relevant to what's going on right now. You got, and again, we're all sensitive to stories from the mainstream world that mention comics. And there was an article, I want to say it was in Time magazine recently, where someone said maybe it's time to retire the Punisher or put him aside right now because people in the military were using this Punisher skull. Some of the National Guard and police that were reacting to the demonstrations on the streets had Punisher garb. And I literally 2 weeks ago had Jerry Conway, the creator of the Punisher, on the show, and I asked him what he thought. And I listen, man. I'm a bleeding heart liberal, but I really think that there's enough of a division between fiction and reality that you don't have to retire the Punisher, and you can keep in perspective what's,
Isn't that the Tom and Jerry theory too? Where
Tell me, what's the Tom and Jerry theory?
Where in cartoons as I was growing up, it was made known that they're like, all right, this is going to be the last of Tom and Jerry being aired regularly because it's too violent. People saying it's too violent for kids, this and that. But
Sure.
I love that. I show my 5-year-old Tom and Jerry today, and he cracks up from the old classic Tom and Jerry. Classic stuff, he still cracks up. I love it.
Well, there you go. So yeah, Kyle, what do you think about the Punisher?
Well, I'm not much of a Punisher fan personally.
Okay.
But
That's okay.
I knew I was going to get that reaction. So I think the Punisher is a really great anti-hero and makes a great supporting character. But the second you start, and I say this as someone who wrote Deathstroke for
Sure.
a minute
DC's
until I was
version of the
fired.
Punisher.
So what do I know?
understand.
Yeah, but one of the problems I had with Deathstroke is that and it's the same with the Punisher, is if he's your main character, what stories are you telling about someone who's doing awful things? Sure, he is doing awful things to people who deserve it most of the time. But yeah, I guess these aren't the same actually, because Slade does what he does for the paycheck,
Right.
and he has some honor to it, but it really is for the money. The Punisher is he's it's kind of the Dexter of anti-heroes, I guess.
There's a place for him.
Yeah.
There's a place for him.
But
and also,
it's a real fine
mean,
line. It's a fine line between wish fulfillment and
Interesting.
I don't know. I don't think you should retire him as a character.
Not
I
at
don't think
all.
you should do that at all.
Isn't it the gray area where you have the Punisher and you both want to take someone down, even though how he wants to do it and how it should be done. So there's always this gray area where when we get to this villain or whoever it is, do I need to take Punisher down or are we going to do this the right way? And I think it makes for great crossover.
But what you just described backs up my point. That's not a Punisher story. That's a Spider-Man story where Punisher is
Daredevil,
in it. Or Daredevil
Punisher story. But that's good though. That's what I mean, and that raises the conversation between characters in terms of
there's also
bad, I got to take him out.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say there's the Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon run that's pretty legendary. But
Absolutely.
my favorite is actually the Jason Aaron, Steve Dillon Max series.
God.
It was only 12 issues. And that was the first time that I really read any sort of Punisher story that was focused on the Punisher and went oh wow, yeah, this is really great. Mm-hmm. To me, it was a testament to how amazing Jason is as a writer, that he was able to take a character where you go, so we're gonna watch him brutally murder so and so and so and so and break so and so over here, and it doesn't feel gross or gratuitous. It's
okay.
I don't know how he pulled it off.
See,
I might reread it tonight now.
But
it was never wish fulfillment for me. It was just, again, I can watch a violent cowboy story. I can watch a violent gangster story, any sort of street urban story, and enjoy it for the entertainment and just disassociate, because again, it's fiction, and I don't, whatever. That's, again. What about you, Lance? What do you think?
If Punisher wasn't so violent, and again, Punisher, those comics were the most available comics in the comic book stores that I went into, then it wouldn't have been necessary for so many crossovers, I think. These cool characters popped up in Punisher's comic more than any other comic. Obviously Moon Knight. All these characters because obviously they're all wanting to take someone down, but they also had to stop Punisher from doing what he was doing. And so I probably wouldn't have learned about all these cool characters so early if Punisher wasn't who he was. And
that was that period when they literally had at least three monthly Punisher books.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's like that Chuck Dixon era of Punisher.
Yep.
War Journal, and I forget what the third book was called. Yeah, man. No, I'm totally with you. And yeah, honestly, I do understand. Then I do understand the concern of violent fiction in a very violent time. I get it. I really do. But again, I don't know. I can separate my brain from really having an honest moral outrage about what's happening and the sadness of what's happening right now compared to the fiction myself. So
I think as a writer, where I struggle now looking at characters is I go, okay, what is the foundation? Like, what is if the character is a car, like, what's the engine that they're built around? And if that engine, and if that engine, there are some engines where I go, I don't know how to make that start. And I had a lot of trouble on Deathstroke early on because I was going like, he's supposedly the best at what he does. He's an incredible assassin. Who is he going against? Because they're not going to let me have him kill Batman,
Certainly not.
So how do I concoct schemes or storylines where there are challenging villains, but also he can kill them, without me suddenly looking to like slaughter half the DC lineup of characters. And I had a kind of an interesting solution to it, but it didn't quite work, as evidenced by me getting fired. But but with the Punisher, that's the fact that you bring that up, Lance, that like how many crossovers, that's really interesting. And I also wonder, did it go the other way as well? During that era, did the Punisher show up in everyone else's books?
He showed up. Yeah, he showed up a lot. He showed up in Daredevil. The other thing too. Just thinking about it, I don't think that I'm the judge I should be the judge of anybody's life or anything like that. But when the Punisher said a guy should go down, he probably did something that was probably right. There were a lot of guys that really did deserve, to go down.
Well, I know what I was going to say. We ran into. Okay, I remember now. So the territory we ran into, I as a fan with Deathstroke and with Punisher, was that I found at a certain point I realized like, Deathstroke has he's devolved into the character that writers use as a shorthand, as a cliffhanger reveal. Like, and now Deathstroke's here. You're like, oh my god, this is like shit's about to get real because like it's Deathstroke or it's Punisher. But then they're only actually being used to show how great the character whose book it really is actually is because they defeat him.
Right.
And that was actually the whole premise of the start of my Deathstroke run was like, yeah, he's got a bad rep because like he keeps losing. Like the last like 5 stories we've seen of Deathstroke, he's like gets his ass handed to him in order to make the hero look that much better. I was like, well, how is Deathstroke going to get his mojo back?
Right.
And Punisher, I feel like there was a period where writers probably were using him in a similar way, where it was like, how do we what's the most badass cliffhanger to show how serious the stakes just got? I got it. Frank Castle is on the scene.
There was a comic. There was an issue where there was a crossover with the Punisher and the Incredible Hulk, and obviously the Hulk had won the fight. Okay, so you think it's over, and the very last page, the Punisher, I think he's on like a truck with this huge cannon, and it ends with him firing the cannon at the Incredible Hulk, which is, to me, it's so Punisher right there. He
That's
can
awesome.
lose, but he loses in grand fashion.
A big way.
Yeah.
Well, whenever they would have a street hero, like I remember Green Arrow fighting Solomon Grundy. And I remember seeing comments from readers going, no way in hell is Solomon Grundy going to win. It's like, what's the title of the comic? Green Arrow. Who do you think is going to win the goddamn fight? Green Arrow. I'm
Dude, even as a kid, I was reading Marvel versus DC crossover, and I was going, Wolverine beats Lobo? Really?
Who beat Lobo? I'm sorry.
Wolverine beats Lobo? Really?
Yeah, I don't think so. That's funny.
You can fly him into outer space, Lance.
Right. I mean,
did you guys? Great. No, you can, go ahead, Lance. Make your point.
But Wolverine is by far one of the most popular characters in all of comics. So I have friends who don't know a lot about comics, but they love Wolverine, and so it's Wolverine versus anybody. Right. And if you ask them, if I said, "Hey, Wolverine's going to fight Lobo," Wolverine. Before I can finish the
That's the Batman argument. That's always the no matter Batman versus Godzilla, Batman. It's like, and it doesn't matter, and it's like, because Batman's brain will always find a way.
Yep.
Or it's like when you ask Lance on a podcast recording, who would you rather have? Nick Foles or Josh McCown? He doesn't even let you finish his sentence before he jumps in with Nick Foles.
All day. Foles all day. Even against the number one defense in Indianapolis, still Foles.
Over Josh McCown, just so we're clear.
That
was the question.
That was the question.
Yeah, that was the question of the podcast.
Okay, the tough thing there, Nick Foles is an Arizona Wildcat. I'm an Arizona Wildcat. Okay, and
we already know where he's going to rule on this.
Right, and so, and I love Josh McCown. I love him to death, man. But this one, I'll catch a lot of flack. I live in Arizona, guys.
I understand. It's cool. We may as well. And seriously, guys, I love where this conversation has gone, because it's been a lot of fun. I don't want to monopolize your time if you have to go soon, but I do want to ask Lance. The Bears being 3-1. It's been a very interesting season. They have pulled victory out of the jaws of defeat a couple times. I think it didn't surprise me that they lost last Sunday, because it's like, look, because they were getting really good breaks. And also making their own breaks too.
The football guys were shining down on the Bears for 3 weeks in a row. How many touchdowns did Foles throw in the fourth quarter? In the fourth quarter alone, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen, right?
No,
it should have been 5.
No. Yeah.
But I'll tell you this. About that game. I wasn't fully aware of how good that Indianapolis defense is. And what most people may not understand, I'm not saying that Nick Foles played a great game, or he didn't. Our offensive line, our offensive line got beat up a bit. There were adjustments that had to be made, but that defense is their defensive coordinator comes from Rod Marinelli, who coached under with Lovey. They play exactly like it. They play like we play. You look at wherever that ball was, there were 11 men tackling the ball. They're extremely good. I'm telling you right now, they're the number one defense.
Yeah.
And if you are a quarterback that is going to get your first start, okay, it's going to be tough when you get your first start against the best defense in the NFL. All right, and so I'll leave it there, and I'll say I do believe that this week Foles will be a lot more successful, a lot more productive.
I have a question. I have not asked you this, Lance, off air or on. Yep. What is the biggest difference between Vic Fangio and a Chuck Pagano defense? Because so far, I don't know if it's a perception thing or what is it, but
I'll tell you. I can tell you right now. The one thing that sticks out the most is a 3-man rush. A 3-man rush. You see, I've seen a 3-man rush with the Bears more with Pagano than I've ever seen with Fangio. Fangio is going to bring the heat. He's going to play deep, disciplined coverage, but he's going to bring the heat and he's going to rush. I think he believes the same way that we believe with Lovey that you can be more effective by rushing 4 because the ball has to come out. And if you're rushing with 3, then you're just giving so much time for the quarterback to find somebody. So I think that's the biggest difference I've seen.
Do you think Pagano's the defensive coordinator next year?
It's too early. I mean, we're 3-1. If the Bears finish, we just finished quarter 1. There's 4 quarters. Right. If the Bears finish each quarter 3-1, they're in the playoffs. They're sitting pretty,
12-4 put you in the playoffs. Absolutely, right? Man. Yep, absolutely. This is awesome, man. I'm dying. I'm like, this feels like it's 25 years ago. I feel like a child again. This is excellent. I love this. Here, this is good, and some people have great questions. First of all, Jeff Lowry he said I have to drop off the live feed. He wanted to say I love Kyle's work. I just backed the project, so that's great. Looks awesome.
Oh, thanks, Jeff.
Can't wait to
finish there you go, man. Can't wait to finish the podcast later. And then Bo is back and has a football question. Were you alone as a Chicago Bear or an NFL player that read comics? Sorry, I had to ask. And you did cover a little bit of this, but yeah, like who were the other NFL guys that were reading comics then? Could you count them on one hand?
I can count them on 0 fingers. Israel Adonijah is a comic book guy. I will tell you this. When I started working with Top Cow and we wrote the book Seraph, I was brought into the studios. There were a group of people, and I also did a deal with Carson Daly where we went to a comic book production company, and I was grilled on my knowledge of comics. People would bring up stories. They would pepper me with stories and say, "Hey, do you remember this issue?" Or did you follow this comic right here and test my knowledge? So I would tell them that story, where that story tailed off from, and which characters I followed from there. And after about 20 minutes, everybody in the studio was like, "Okay, yeah, you know what you're talking about, all right." So when I talked with Izzy, I did the same thing. I kind of wanted to test his comic book history, and so Izzy's history was more tied to singular characters, and for me, like reading the X-Men and seeing the whole team, I wanted to see what direction or where, what happened when you guys broke up. Like Storm, what did you do? And Cable, this new character, Cable. I want to see what happens with Cable, and now he's got his own team, and that's how comic books has always been for me. So Izzy will be the only guy.
You're a team player. You're a team guy. I can see that. But yes, you're right. That's so funny. Izzy's
who else
been
read
on the score a couple times before with his comic book project. So yeah.
Your buddy and a friend of mine, Shay, is a big comic book nerd.
Shay didn't share that with me.
No?
And really? That's a shame because Shay was one of my favorite guys, man. I really like Shay. He was fun to be around. Wasn't as productive on the field, but he was fun to be around. All right.
Kyle, was Shay the guy that you brought, like, he would go to San Diego with you and stuff? Was that Shay?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay,
so I
remember.
That's right. We did see you there. Shay and his wife came to San Diego with me 1 or 2 years actually. But you know how I met him. Lance was Izzy was with him at Emerald City in Seattle one year, and Izzy was like he was like, oh yeah, Shay, come here. And he's like, oh, he's a big comics guy. And it was after I think Shay's rookie season.
Yeah.
And we were talking and he was like, he's a monthly reader. Like he's that's so funny. That never came up.
That is funny. Huh.
See, the score guys used to make fun of me with comics, but the way that I got their respect was I was a big boxing guy. And I covered boxing for over 16 years.
Great
So they're
sport.
like, oh my God, I love, well, Lance, what do you think of what's happening? I mean, really, let's real fast, the heavyweight division. What do you, I mean, I got to be honest, Lance.
Yeah.
I really wanted to like, the Browns bomber right now, and I'm ashamed.
And Deontay Wilder.
Deontay Wilder, yes.
Mhm.
I really wanted to like him. I got to be honest, the stuff he would do in press conferences disappointed me, and I hated Tyson Fury. But then I found out that poor Tyson Fury was messed up and needed meds to stay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got depression issues. So when he's properly medicated
Yeah.
and stuff, all of a sudden the loyalty switched.
Uh-huh.
And I got to tell you, and I just really, I really think Tyson Fury is the real deal. And,
Oh, yeah.
And
He's the real deal.
Yeah.
I've been a fan of him ever since I seen him run in in a Batman costume in the press conference. I'm like, this guy is out of his mind, and I love it. But I like Wilder. I do like Wilder. There are things about you building your brand, that I completely understand. I mean, Mike Tyson's brand was one of the best boxing brands that was ever built.
Totally agree. I was
you-
a massive Tyson fan.
Right,
Massive Tyson.
and for Wilder, for so long, guys weren't surviving fights. He was knocking guys out, and that just built that persona.
Sure.
One thing about boxing is, a lot of people see you get knocked out or knocked down. I want to see him get up, and I'd like to see him fight and just fight. Get a little bit of your respect back.
I hear you, man. Well, the thing I'd like to see him do is, honestly, hey, Marciano. All it was that big punch.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, the guy had good defense, could take a good shot. Tyson was a complete fighter, and
Right.
also that size disadvantage he made work for him.
Yeah.
Got underneath guys and popped up and would fight and stuff.
Yeah.
And Wilder, beyond the power, and he showed it in the two Fury fights. He doesn't have a plan.
He's
He
not
doesn't have
right.
a jab.
He's not a very good boxer. He's not a very good boxer. Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I think you gotta, when somebody can hit back and that's what happened with Ali and Sonny Liston. Everyone's like, oh my God, Sonny Liston's gonna kill Ali, and all of a sudden it was like, hey, this Ali is Cassius Clay then, but it's like he's 2 inches taller than Sonny Liston. God damn, he's as big as Sonny Liston.
He's as big as Sonny Liston, right?
And all of a sudden he can hit back, and it's like, Sonny Liston didn't know how to handle it.
Right.
I mean, and so that's the thing.
Literally.
And the same thing with Tyson. When you took away the intimidation factor,
Yeah.
all of a sudden everything was exposed. And I think that's the case with Wilder right now. The intimidation factor because of Fury. And you're right, it's gonna be very interesting to see Deontay Wilder come back from from this loss. So there you go. Good boxing.
Agreed.
I like that.
Uh-huh.
I'm learning. I don't. I've only gotten into boxing recently.
Hey, I love combat sports. I love combat sports. I'm the guy that moves, with the fight. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, me too, man.
And it's exciting for me. I jump out of my seat when I see big hits in football. I see exciting plays on field in almost any competitive sport. When there's just this jolt of adrenaline and it happens in a second, I jump.
Is there anything better than truly drama that comes from a great sports play? I mean, really, I am in my apartment alone watching football, and when somebody completes a pass, and it's just literally, I scream, and I'm by myself in my apartment, and I'm screaming. So I get it. What were you gonna say?
This is one thing that has kind of bothered me a bit about the sport of football. There's this big drawback from, when they talk about, oh, this guy's a dirty player, or he did this, or he did that. There's an emotion that goes in to guys that are considered dirty players, or you see them do something dirty and the crowd boos them, and you're waiting for someone to pay them back the whole game, and if it happens, great. If it doesn't, you're like, oh, it's a story that you tell for years to come on. And in the NFL, it really got to this point where they just wanted guys to kind of be robots, you excessive dancing in the end zone. Oh, this is too much chatter. And and it's we're flagging you for every little thing that you do, and I think it takes away a bit of the emotion for the fan, because I really always got tied into that stuff. People would talk about these great defenses. Oh, Lyle Zeta. Oh man, these stories of these guys in the locker room and punched guys, and they were mean and they were dirty players. And all we wanted to see is us to put one in their face. Those are the emotions of sports, man. It's really magnetic for me.
Lance, have you ever seen the video? Lance, have you ever seen the video of John? You'll know who the player was. It was 1986 or 1987. It was really the end of Jim McMahon's career, even though he still played another 6 some years. But it was the Packers game where he throws the ball, and it's a full 4 seconds later, the guy comes up behind him and picks up McMahon and body slams his shoulder into the turf.
That was a little excessive.
Well, yeah. And poor Jim. I mean, God, again, I got to really know a lot of those 80s Bears.
Yeah.
And older Bears as well. And that's honestly, I wanted to ask you about that in terms of, the position of linebacker is such a, really hallmark of Bears history.
Oh, yeah.
And so many great linebackers over the years. Doug Buffon was a very good friend of mine.
Yeah, I love Doug.
And I figured as much, man. What kind of conversations with guys like Butkus and Buffon and Singletary and guys like that have you had over the years?
Well, I don't know if I've even had a conversation with Butkus, but me and Doug talked a lot. Doug pulled me into his RV, early on, my first few years with the Bears, just to talk. He was like, "Hey, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to talk to play next to the face of the team." And so me and him would have great conversations and about football, about play, he would always let me know. He was like, if there's anybody in the world that knows how you feel every day, it's me, and so I always felt real comfortable around Doug. He was awesome.
Were you cool with Brian Urlacher? Was it cool?
Yeah, I've always been cool, but it was one of those things where he brought me in. I wasn't even thinking about where this conversation was going to go.
No, but you're right. I mean, no, Buffon was Butkus's guy.
Yeah,
just like you were Urlacher's guy. No,
right.
And that's man. No. And again, knowing Doug and getting to know Doug over the years and stuff. I worked 9 years with Doug. I mean, he was seriously, man. Him and Gail 2 weeks ago broke my heart. Gail gave a shit about me when I was a bank teller trying to break into radio, and when I broke in at the Score, him and Artie, his wife, are like, "John, we're so proud of you." And I'm like, "Mrs. Sayers," and she's like, "Gail, do you remember John when he was our bank teller?" And he's like, "Yeah, actually I do." And it was like, she's like, "You are living your dream, John. Way to go." And after that, I was telling Kyle this before. Every now and then, Gail would pull me to the side because he took over for Walter doing Bears color after Walter passed away. Okay. Walter was a sweetheart to me as well, and but I really Doug's the guy I got to know the best. But Gail, man, like an uncle, would just be like, "How they treating you? You doing all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, everything's cool." And he's like, "Well, you're where you should be, John." He's like, "You keep doing what you're doing." Gail Sayers, I'm like, "Thank you, sir." I mean, goddamn, I really, it did. It really, I mean, Yeah, he was a wonderful. He really was. And man, I'll tell you, were you there, Lance, for the All-Century celebration? Were you able to go?
No, I couldn't make it. I had told them early on, man. It was I had family obligations.
I understand. Mm-hmm. Jeff Joniak's an old buddy of mine as well, voice of the Bears.
Love Jeff.
He was the MC. Yeah, and I was asking him about the thing, and he said it was great, but it was heartbreaking because poor Gail.
Yeah,
being in the chair, poor Richard Dent really, had to kind of look over him and make sure he was okay. And it was heartbreaking, fucking heartbreaking. So yeah,
Lance, when you join a team or like when you join the Bears in particular, do you how much of that stuff? Do they have a class on Bear history, or how do you even, if you're coming out of college, especially say right now, this generation, the number of people who ever watched Walter Payton play growing up, versus even then someone like Gail Sayers, who is 20 years earlier than that. I grew up on old highlight videos, but I grew up in Chicago. Like, if you're coming onto the Bears now, like, how do you find out about the players, or are the people that are coming on now, do they already know about some of the kind of former legends or former greats?
Yeah, I don't think there are a lot of the young guys that are coming out now that do their history, that study their history the way they're supposed to. So they're more like you, where they just see the highlight films. You know, they're not going to be willing to go in and say, I want to watch a game. You know, and you know, but you can't go into Hollis Hall without being surrounded by the greats. Everywhere you go, you're surrounded by the greats. So for me, I wanted to, and I had a lot of coaches that I played with that, you know, played at least maybe 1 year for the Bears. So every year I'd go down those halls and I would try to find out. I was like, what year did he play?
Yeah, tell us what those halls are like, since you know, some of us haven't seen them.
Yeah. Well, I can
see
tell.
Comics tour.
Oh, you wouldn't be surprised if you go in there. You would see me hanging on the hallway.
There you go.
I feel like I'm at home.
The Lance Briggs wing. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Cool.
Sorry, I cut you off for a joke. I didn't mean.
No. But it's cool. You know, for me, I would always look at all these linebacker greats that are up there in the Hall of Fame, and I would look at their stats and I would look at their accomplishments. And I remember looking at Singletary's, and it says, okay, he had 10 Pro Bowls. And I was like, okay, I want to try to get 10 Pro Bowls in a row. Wow. And then it also said he had 10 All Pros in a row. And I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to top that. You know. That's great.
Does footage exist, like, at a place like Hallis Hall? If a new player wanted to go watch Gale Sayers running around the left edge in 1968,
it's a lot easier to get now because everything had to get transferred to hard drive.
Yeah.
So now it's just a matter of
So
now it's just a matter of plugging it in and putting it on a hard drive and handing it to a player or sending it to his iPad.
I was gonna say, like, how many years back can you ask, like, the video people for, like?
I have stuff from back in '88 when I first started playing from Betamax that is being transferred into a hard drive. So
good for you, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I got to talk to Steve Sable from NFL Films a few times.
I'm a huge NFL Films nut.
And yeah, man, no, just the history of that company is fascinating in itself. And yeah, I mean, and you know, I'm a big film buff. I'm a big documentary fan, and so really, what they were able to accomplish and the associations they made early, thank God, because we really do have the history of football right there. And I don't miss covering day-to-day sports. I did it for 16 years. If I were to ever go back to sports, it would be in a documentary capacity.
There you go.
Because I do think there are incredible stories, but just like anything else, it's, personal seat licenses, the way the game has changed from the ownership standpoint just really kind of disappoints me. I could still enjoy games, but I don't follow it like I used to because I saw how the sausage got made. And I see how the comic book sausage gets made. But for some reason, it really bums me out. Being from a blue-collar city like Chicago, being able to cut lawns and be able to buy a ticket and go to a game by myself and stuff, I just feel bad for little kids that option isn't there for them like it was when we were little kids. You know what I mean?
I agree with you 100%. It's but the I guess the outlying decision for me and what it does excite me is how excited my kids, my friends' kids, my nieces and nephews are about playing these sports, and in a lot of ways they were inspired by their uncle. And so when they play, it's, hey, we have a game Saturday. Now, no matter what they're playing, whether it's football, baseball, volleyball, they want their uncle to come and watch them play. And it's the most exciting thing is seeing how excited they get to compete. And that's another thing that makes you jump. That makes me jump out. I'm one of the loudest parents in whatever venue I'm in. I'm one of the loudest parents because I want you to know how proud I am of you.
There was an old South Side sports writer, Bill Gleason, who died in the early 2000s. And as he was getting older and didn't want to deal with the pro game, he's like, I'd rather go watch a high school game. I'd rather watch a junior high school game. because that's where the passion still is. And he goes, there's nothing more exciting than watching prep sports on a Friday night and really getting into it. And I always appreciated that about Bill. Bill was a smart old dude.
Yeah.
So,
Lance, I
there you
sent in the chat here on the side. I don't know if you can see it, but I sent a link to
the
the
private
Jim
chat.
McMahon body slam.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, and actually,
You want to see
Ed
this?
pointed out that it was Charles Martin
Okay.
that body slam McMahon. Thank you. That's very good.
I want to
And,
watch Lance's face as he watches this.
Well, this is not letting me bring it up.
Oh no.
Yeah, you'd probably have to copy the
copy
link and paste it
Okay,
into another window. So
Oh, yeah,
you
just-
can do that.
yeah.
You can do that. And I'll remind people as we're talking that it's The Trap by Lance Briggs and Kyle Higgins, and they're in the midst of their Kickstarter. I want to see how many days you guys have left.
We
While
have
we're
I
talking.
think 24 days
Yeah.
left.
Yep. There you go. And they still need about another 14 grand, so they could use your help. While
We
Lance
have-
is watching, I was going to say, Kyle, do you want to mention some of the other incentives?
We have a bunch of incentive. We have a bunch of tiers that you can pledge to, reward tiers. There's a $40 tier for the hardcover of the book. There's a $10 tier for just a straight PDF of the book. We wanted it to be very
Digital.
accessible.
That's
But
awesome.
also there's a $40 tier for the deluxe oversized hardcover, and then it goes up from there. So we have a $50 tier with a different print by either Rod Reese, Elsa Chartier, or Declan Shalvey. We've got I know we have a $70 tier of all the prints together. We have a book plate tier. Then we've got the All Pro and the Pro Bowl tiers, which feature some lovely Chicago Bears memorabilia that Lance has been nice enough to donate.
Wow.
That you go get a hold of. Did I just see it? Did you just see it happen? I saw your face.
Yeah,
change.
I saw his face too. I think he saw it. Yeah, poor Jim.
It's pretty gnarly, right?
That's a dirty play.
the game,
my
man.
goodness.
He had a hit list on his towel with like numbers that he crossed out. Apparently,
I would feel really bad as an offensive lineman on that play if I wasn't
Letting
aware
that
of it.
happen. Yeah.
Because if he had a hit list on his towel as an offensive lineman, he's looking to do something like that. And it's just in football. There's so many angles to these things. When you go in and you play a game and you're like, okay, when you guys get to the pile, you need to get your heads on a swivel because their offensive linemen they're peeling guys off out of huddle. Until that whistle blows. The offensive linemen they're hustling and they see any defender they just smack them. And so it's obviously they can't do it anymore. But it was one of those things.
Right.
We played Detroit. They would say, "Hey, Dominic Raiola, he's going to try to peel you off. So you need to get your head on a swivel." And I would come up to the hub to the ball carrier, and he'd be tackled.
Yeah.
The guy would be tackled, and I'd have my head on the swivel, but the guy next to me doesn't. And next thing you know, his body just goes flying next to me. Now I'm fighting with Dominic Raiola, like, oh, get off my teammate and stuff like that. But and I grabbed my teammate. I was like, you didn't listen to what Coach said, did you?
Another one of my guys on the Bears that I was friends with was Ron Rivera when he was still playing. And really, right after he stopped playing. And I'm so happy for him. And I know he's, probably, is he with the team right now? I don't even know if he's coaching anywhere.
He was on the sideline, but he was. They said he was fighting and he was fighting on the sideline, and we'll see how long he can last.
Yeah, John, he's the head coach in Washington, but about the cancer diagnosis.
I feel terrible for him. Oh, that sucks, man. To have
John,
to work for Dan Snyder.
I'm gonna plug
John, you know about the cancer diagnosis, right?
About Ron's cancer diagnosis?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
God.
So that's what Lance was alluding to just now.
Yeah.
That he's on the sideline, but he's fighting. Yeah.
God damn. Oh, I hate hearing that. And again, I mean, I haven't talked to Ron in 10 years, just because he's busy and he's been coaching, and I've been thrilled for his career. Oh, that's heartbreaking. God damn it. Man, seriously, this is what happens. Honestly, Kyle, I'm 55, and a lot of my friends that were older than me, they're starting to hit those years, and that's why Gail, Chet Kopic, Chet Kopic, it was a car accident with Chet. Chet, for people watching and listening, great sportscaster in Chicago for decades. And literally, I had him on one of my podcasts only like 3 months before he passed away. So, yeah, man, sadly, this is what happens with life sometimes. And Ronnie's not that old. I mean, Ronnie's only probably 10 years older than me, or 5 or 6 years older than me. I don't know. But
yeah, he was Lance. Ron was he was your defensive coordinator during the Super Bowl year, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I did know he was sick, Lance, and that just breaks my heart because that's probably the last time when he was still defensive coordinator for the Bears. That's the last time I probably talked to him. And you know, people get busy with their gigs, and I've been out of sports for years, so it's like, you know, it's cool. And, you know, I don't expect to see the people that I normally see. But yeah, it fucking breaks my heart, man. That's sad.
He'll get through this. He'll get through this.
Okay.
You know, to have what he have and still be on the sidelines right now. You
Sure.
know, Ron's a tough guy. You know,
very tough, and tough guy and a sweetheart at the same time, man.
Same time.
Oh yeah.
Learned a lot from him. You know,
that's great to hear.
Absolutely, and I know the men that he's coaching each year that he's coaching, I learn a lot from him too.
Speaking of learning a lot, Lance, what I was gonna pivot to ask you about comics writing so far in a more full-time capacity here. What have your takeaways been like thus far?
Good question.
I think there's 2 or 3 viewpoints. One has been my personal experience, which has been a lot of fun. It's just been a ride, you know, and going back and forth with you and you kind of explaining. There's things that you explain that I get really clear, that are really clear when you always talk in the comic book world. This is how certain things are viewed, you know. So if we're going to do something like this, you have to structure it a different way. You know, if that makes sense to you, you know, some of my ideas. And that's been cool because you know, in comics, I could have all the ideas in the world, you know, but until I am able to share those ideas with, you know, someone like yourself, you know, Phil Hester, and, you know, and you guys in the comic book world, or
that's great.
You know, then I don't really feel like they're verified, you know. And then when I talk with you and you say, okay, this is a good idea, or you know, I'm not in love with that idea, and we work things out, then you know, I'm like, okay, we're going somewhere here, you know.
Yeah.
The other one is you and I got on the phone that one Sunday, and we had to iron a bunch of stuff out.
Yep.
And when we got on the phone, you were like, just getting off of the phone, handling another issue, and before that, I had to handle another issue, and now you're going to be on the phone with me for the next probably 2, maybe 3 hours. That is taxing, you know, and that to me is how I envision being a part of the comic book world. You know, that's what your days are going to be like. They're going to you're going to go from one call to another that has to be done. Things that have to be done. That's my experience.
That's awesome. Yeah. Kyle has, you know, I remember Orson Welles talking about his first movie and working with John Ford's cameraman, Greg Tolan. Uh-huh. And Tolan was excited to work with Welles as a new director because he knew he would think of ideas that conventional directors wouldn't.
Yeah.
And that intrigued him. And they would be, all right, let's figure out how to do that. Has Lance, you know, kind of presented those kinds of out-of-the-box writing ideas that it's like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's actually very good. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And I haven't done that before.
Absolutely. And a lot of it's characters as well, or what I think from a conceptual standpoint makes for really interesting characters. And I say this and I preface it with the term conceptual because, gun to my head, I don't know that I could actually list characters that really epitomize this, but a good character, conceptually anyway, is built on contradictions. Because we as people are not one way or another. We are a combination of the different ways that we need to be, depending on what environment we're in, what groups of people we're around, etc.
Right.
And we have this we have as an individual the capacity to do really, really awesome, sweet things, and also like kind of shitty things or really shitty things. And so I think sometimes, especially working in comics where we don't necessarily have, and I see this a lot because I write, I do screenwriting as well especially because I'm more thinking of myself as a director who writes rather than a writer. But in comics, we don't have some of the luxuries that you have in live action from a storytelling standpoint. And specifically when it comes to characters, you don't have the luxury of a live performance. You don't have, you can't, someone just looking, off and swallowing and you're reading into their face. What do they really mean? Are they conflicted? Are they not? You can do it to a certain extent with the right artistic collaborator in comics, but it's not quite the same thing. And so that means, I think, if you're not careful, it's very easy for you for me anyway, to build very one-note characters that exist purely for the story that I'm trying to tell, as opposed to characters that would have existed outside of the story, even if the story that we're telling right now, this plot, as a device, weren't something that we were doing. So Lance and I have very different approaches where, like I'm just saying, I tend to build characters for the story I'm looking to tell that best, I think, exemplify what I'm looking to explore or say, by putting them through said story. Lance builds people whole cloth, contradictions and all. And just because they're from one place doesn't mean that defines them, because they might also work or live in another place. They might have done all these other things or do these other things going forward. And it's both incredibly frustrating and incredibly inspiring. It's frustrating because my brain doesn't naturally think that way, and it's very hard. It takes a lot of effort on my part. Like literally before we did this call, I was sitting with a notebook building out backstories on something else that I'm working on, because I hadn't done it because I didn't need to yet. I knew who the person was for the story I needed to be telling right now, but I didn't necessarily do the work. And it is a fine line, because you can over, it can become masturbatory where you're just like working on backstories. It's like, but you're not writing pages. Like, what are you, that said, where it's incredibly inspiring is to talk to Lance and to see his notes, or he'll write up something on a character, or even maybe we don't have something on a character, but we need something. And it's like, that's not my go-to. Like, even when Alec and I worked together on Cowl and Hadrian's Wall, etc., like that was always the running joke, is like Alec would go build the characters and I would like build the story, like the narratives, because I'm like, I don't want to, and so anyway, so it's really cool to basically come in with some of these character ideas, or to see the things that resonate for Lance. And then I feel like in those situations, my job then is to go like, okay, how do we make that or those three things, or those three aspects of that person, of that character, really interesting to me, and we can frame them like this through the narrative we're trying to tell here. It doesn't necessarily say that those other things didn't happen, doesn't invalidate them. But the focus of the story we're telling, maybe these three are the best that we build it through. And that's just, it's just basically me crushing Lance's hopes and dreams. Which, by the way, that's a full-time job, my friend.
That's right. Right. I've gotten used to it. But a lot of times, Kyle will say something like he'll crush my little dreams on a character that was like one of my favorite characters, and I'll go to bed that night and I'll think and I'll wake up and I'll start typing and I'll start writing. I was like, you know what? Okay, if I change this character this way and this way, and I bring it up to Kyle, I'm like, all right, what do you think about this? And he'll think about it, and he's probably doing me a favor. And he's like, this could work, this could work, and it's, it's one of those.
Honestly, here's the coolest thing. The coolest thing, bar none, and I'm doing actually, weirdly, in 2020, I've been doing quite a bit of co-writing. Like, I'm doing Ultraman with Matt Groom. I'm doing The Trap with Lance. I have another book with a good friend of mine, Gianna Tropper. I think I might have one more. I can't remember. But what's so cool is that there are certain things that I do feel are intrinsic in the way that I like to write and what I believe makes for a good story. And working with other writers, especially in this case with Lance, what it has done is it has helped me to drill down and find a way to articulate something that I believe strongly, but maybe haven't put into words before, as far as why a story works or an aspect of a story. The other thing it's done, though, is while on the one hand it's helping me to fortify my own feelings about narrative, on the other hand it's forcing me to go, okay, that's how I feel about narrative, but guess what? My way of doing narrative is not the only way to do narrative. So now I'm going, oh, these are my habits. These are both what the difference between a pillar of my foundation or in my foundation or whatever of what I believe to be a good story versus something that I do that is a chiasm. That's it's a very fine line. And where I can figure out how do I grow and how do I open myself to other influences. I've been doing this now full time. This is year 10 for me. So I do feel like finally it's like, okay, I figured out how to do what I do. So now how do I figure out how to do shit that I wouldn't normally do?
I hear you.
And that's the coolest part for me.
Absolutely. That's what you hope for.
So a lot of times, when that comes up, sometimes I don't like the idea, sure. But other times what you're hearing, and by the way, I'll create the support group chat thread on the side. Joe Clark, I'm doing a book with Joe Clark. Between Lance, you, Jana, Joe Clark, and Matt can all have a group chat about. So Kyle tell you the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this one. Anecdote is that? Yeah, he said that to you today too, huh? I just repeat my best stuff, but no, seriously, like so on this one, some of what it is, at times, is me having to step outside myself and go, that's not how I would do it. But is it me not, that being a thing that is not how I would do it? Does that mean, is there a problem with it, or is it just a taste thing? If it's a taste thing, let's figure it out, because that's something I'm trying to broaden. If it's a foundational thing, what is it about it being a foundational thing, and how do I articulate that, and then, or how do I recalibrate, or how do we shift it so it doesn't create a problem as a foundational element while still doing stuff that at the end of the day, like, you just want to, so I like characters that go into my head, I could not tell you why. That's just a part of storytelling. Like, you fall in love with an idea, with a character, with a visual, and that's the other thing, is like, if you just completely get rid of all the cool shit you want to write about, then why are you doing this?
There's a character in the story, Zanzibar, and Zanzibar, he's such a pivotal character in this story, because in this underground world, he is the head of the basically the gang that Jalen is pretty much a part of. So he's like the community. He represents the community leader that knows that there's a kid that can make it out, And so when we first started doing this, we started writing or putting the stories together. I was telling, I told Kyle, I was like, hey, this is the head of the gang, okay? And so in the beginning, Jalen accidentally shoots the senator, and Kyle's like, okay, well, Jalen is part of Zanzibar's gang, okay, and these other characters are part of Zanzibar's gang. And I said, well, and Zanzibar sent him to shoot him. And I said, well, if he's in my mind, I'm like, if he's the community leader and he knows that this kid has a chance, he would never send him to shoot anybody. That's not how it would work. And so it took a while to get to get to the point where I could get the message to Kyle to say, listen, we have to put Zanzibar in a position where bad people do good things, and in this underworld, there are a lot of bad people that are trying to do good things, and that's where we're at with, if we're going to try to save Jalen, he's going to have to put all his bad people to try to send and help him to get out of this trap.
Yep. I remember that conversation too, and it wasn't that I was saying Jalen is being sent to shoot him.
Yeah.
It was more that idea of like, in my mind, again, I don't, the way I would do it would be, because every choice has to matter within. You don't only have so many pages. So I was like,
right.
Oh, well, clearly Jalen's a part of this gang,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an accident, but he's still on the part of what's the phrase, part of the crew,
on the set.
There you go. He's on the set, and Lance is going, well, but he's got a shot here, and you wouldn't be. And basically Lance was opening my eyes to like, there's a way here, a setup that's more nuanced.
Yeah.
That's more interesting to explore
Mm-hmm.
than the reductive version of like, sure, the kids as a part of this gang and others are part of the gang because that's the cleanest version of the narrative. And so it was, so I do remember that for sure. Like, and and now we just yell at each other. Like now it's like,
Good.
There's no, like, we don't mince words at all. Like,
Hey, no, man, you guys have to be honest with each other to make the thing work. And that's seriously, it sounds like the collaboration's working the way it should. You're both learning from each other. That's terrific.
Yeah.
So, guys, honestly, we've almost gone 2 hours. I feel bad that I'm keeping somebody either from dinner or what. You guys are West Coast guys. I mean, it's still early enough that you can enjoy most of the evening.
Oh, I'm in Chicago. Right
Oh,
now.
are you really? Oh, Lance,
Yep.
that's great, man. I'm right by whatchamacallit, Lane Tech. That's where I live. I'm right by 3 miles from Wrigley Field, man.
The movie Wildcats was filmed
Yes.
at Lane Tech.
Yes.
I've wanted to tour Lane Tech High School because
So have I.
It's one of my favorite movies. It's
Well,
one of my
and then,
favorite movies in the world.
that high school is mammoth, and it's over 100 years old. And dude, I'm 55. I don't want to seem like creepy old man. Like, hey, I want to go check out the high school.
Right.
And those co-eds aren't too bad either. And it's like, no, I really want it because it's such an amazing building. Lou Gehrig played against Lane Tech when he was a high school baseball player.
I didn't know
And he was representing New York, and Lane Tech was representing Chicago. No, it's got an amazing history, and it's so big. And I literally will, and especially during COVID, a nice day like today, walk in front of the school and just enjoy the greenery and everything.
Cool,
and so that's hilarious. Oh, shame on me, man. I didn't realize, because again, like I told you, man, I'm not paying attention day to day with sports like I did when I was working, because I had 16 years of it, and it's like, all right, I just want to get back to like, can I dip into a game and have a good time watching it?
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of where my level of interest is and stuff.
That's awesome.
So forgive me, I didn't realize you were back in town. That's awesome, man. That's
Appreciate
great.
it. You got it.
That's excellent. Well, hey, the trap really looks great. People have been saying great things after they saw the Kickstarter video. You guys have just over 3 weeks left. We wish you success. You're 2/3 of the way to your goal, and I think you guys make it a very affordable and a good opportunity. If people want to just, like you said, get the digital copy, that's great. If they want to go full boat, a reasonably priced hardcover, and hell, if you got the money, I guess Lance has some cool Bears memorabilia that he's willing to part with. So that's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Anybody that can help bring the trap to life, I want to thank you and appreciate. We really appreciate you. It's been a great ride for me. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, John. Thank you, guys.
Honestly, thank you guys for coming on, and truly, Lance, no, I'm glad we got to talk sports as well as comics. And really, I love that Punisher tangent and hearing about some of your favorite books. I know a lot of fans will appreciate that and only feel, that's the great thing, man, is then if they do see it at a convention, hopefully they saw or heard the word balloon, and they'll pass that on to you guys. I think that's happened for Kyle.
Next time we do the show, John, we'll have to take a segment to talk about the Image Valiant crossover of Lance's. Yes. His eyes just lit up at that one.
That was great. Yeah.
Exo Manowar and
Wildcat, Stormwatch, all that, Cyberforce, all that group. Yeah.
Hilarious, man. That's fantastic. I was just talking to the Valiant guys today about Baltimore Con. I could appreciate that.
I want to thank the Image guys for the swimsuit edition they did.
Who can forget? Those were the days.
Oh my
I
goodness!
like
I
it.
can't believe that came out, man. That was amazing. All right, guys.
That's hilarious, guys. Seriously, thank you very much for coming on.
You got
Take
it.
care of
Oh, our
yourselves.
pleasure. It's
Have a good
always
one.
great, John.
All right, man.
All right, take care,
All right,
guys.
take it easy, Lance Briggs and Kyle Higgins. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you all for watching. A lot of fun. A great word balloon live tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. It seemed like the peanut gallery was laughing along with us, which was terrific. Isn't it interesting the places that the conversation went to? Tomorrow on Word Balloon Live in the afternoon, Christopher Cantwell's going to be joining us, the new Iron Man writer, a great television writer, Halt and Catch Fire. What an amazing show that is. I can't recommend it enough. It was one of those other AMC shows alongside Walking Dead, alongside Mad Men and the like. If you've never seen it, if you are fascinated by the computer age, it really is an amazing look back. It's an incredible soundtrack as a guy who lived through all that. I really love it from that standpoint as well. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Chris Cantwell. Of course, he's working on Paper Girls as well, the Brian K. Vaughan Cliff Chang comic book that is being adapted for television. He's the showrunner for that as well. So that's tomorrow on Word Balloon Live. Thanks a lot for watching today. As always, stay safe, stay happy,